would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to a brand new week, folks. Last week was hard. It was a hard week. I don't even remember how many real shows I did last week. I know we had the interview that went up on Friday, which was great. I thought it was awesome to finally get some ground truth on Detroit. I think clearly it's worth your time to look more into it. I think the same warnings we've always sort of put out there relating to Detroit are true, but clearly there is success to be had because we had a real life example on display on Friday. I have no idea what was going on last week. I had lots of stuff I wanted to do, and I ended up along about Monday just getting insane headaches. It lasted for three and a half days, and I'm not real sure what caused it. I don't know. Maybe I was spending too much time breathing in construction adhesive or mortar or something. I was doing an awful lot of home stuff. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that all of my grand plans have sort of migrated from plan A to plan B, and then from plan B to plan B part 2. So there's been a lot of shifting. The timetable has been completely thrown on its ear. That continues to be the truth. I am closing in on completion. I every day make efforts to make headway. Of course, I did lose 3 days last week. It was one of those deals where the headaches were so insane that I had to take medicine that managed to deal with the headache, but also would put me to sleep for 12-hour chunks of time. So feeling better now. We may have a shift in the market that I think is worth talking about, and we'll talk more about that on today's show. It's always a good idea to review your strategies based on what's going on in your local market. So let this show potentially be a evaluation point, if nothing else, for you to decide what you're doing. If you are someone who is a home flipper, you may already know this. I mean, the data that I'm going to quote here is actually reporting on something that's already being noted. So a lot of you home flippers may already be aware of this. But if you're someone who is just thinking about jumping into doing the home flipping thing, I think the latest data that we're seeing is important for you to know about. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I also wanted to let everybody know that we did, in fact, I haven't been giving updates on the $50 Amazon gift cards we give out every month. Wanted to let you know that we did give the September's out. Congratulations to Brendan, who won the $50 Amazon gift card for September. Funny thing about Brendan, and I know saying this out loud make it sound like it was rigged, but I've known Brendan since high school or even earlier. I think we actually met in junior high school, but we've been buddies for a super long time. But I went through my normal routine of randomly selecting an email address, and I saw it and thought, that email address looks familiar. I'm almost sure that's from my old buddy Brendan. Sure enough, it was. So thank you, Brendan, for bothering to listen to my show. You may be one of the only people who've been listening to me longer than everyone else, because you've had to listen to my bull since junior high school. So good on you for the staying power and then being willing to listen to me go on in this podcast. So, so I thought I'd share that. Of course, we'll be doing it again in October. So if you'd like to get your name in the hat for potentially winning that $50 Amazon gift card, we've been doing it every month. We've given away, I don't know, $550 to $650, I guess, at this point. So head on over to therebelbroker.com, click on the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to support the show. And yes, you will be supporting the show, but you'll also be entering your email address for that $50 Amazon gift card drawing. And make sure it's an email address that you can be reached at, because that's how I'm going to reach out to you if you win. I'll verify that there's a human being on the other end of the email address. Once I've verified that, that is the email address where the $50 Amazon gift card will be sent. It's a digital gift card, so it makes it easy. and delivery happens almost immediately. So good luck to those of you who have yet to enter, and congratulations to those of you who've already won, including Brendan, our latest winner for September. Okay, so today's story comes to us from Housing Wire. And in the second quarter of 2017, we noted fewer investors flipping homes. Now, that's obviously a general statistic. That's something that's going to be an average across the country. But I think whenever you hear news like that, if you're someone who's a flipper, it's important to look at your own market. Your local market, the market you work in, may be different, but this is absolutely something that should kick off your evaluation process to make sure you're making smart decisions now that'll reap you the biggest rewards. Now, does it necessarily mean you need to completely abandon your purchasing strategy? No. It just might mean that in order for you to reap the greatest rewards on that remodel, it may not make sense to do an immediate sale. It might make more sense if you think we're heading for a further slowdown, if you think things are just going to flatten, and you don't think market appreciation is going to affect things much. Because remember, the first folks you lose in home flipping are always the folks who tend to benefit most from market momentum. Now, and in order to really understand this, maybe it's important to review the types of folks, the types of house flips that you get. Now, back in the bad old days, just before the big downturn, when house flipping was being done by just about anybody and everybody, most folks weren't doing a whole lot. They were buying a property. They were going through the escrow process. Maybe they'd paint the place. Maybe they'd get some landscaping done. Maybe. I had folks who would literally buy it and do nothing and sell it and have a contract for the property prior to closing escrow, so that escrow would start. Escrow would sometimes close just days after the escrow they were in. And how did you do this? Well, the markets were insane. People were bidding like crazy, and they were simply relying on market momentum. In other words, how much of the value of the home increased over the period of time from when you bought it to when you sold it. And that was it. You were banking on this momentum of the market to really carry along the profits you were going to make from the property. That's category one. And to be really super honest, those are lazy flippers. I may be talking to some of you, but I think if you look in the mirror and you think about your flipping and you realize you do very little to a house, when you flip it, you realize what you're really doing is leveraging off of market momentum. The fact that the home will be worth $10,000 more depending on what market you're in, right? I'm using that as a round number, not as an example of what I'm seeing here. But if you know that over the course of the time it's going to take you to close escrow and the month or 2 or 3 that you're going to hold it, you know you're going to increase that value by 10, 15, 20,000 or just 10,000, whatever it is, and you're cool with that, that's really how you're making your money, and that's fine. I like flipping. I think flipping is more interesting when it's a value add, when you're not just riding the wave of appreciation. When you are going into a property, you're taking a critical look at it and you're evaluating it, right? If you ever go out and get your real estate license, and I'm sure a lot of you do, one of the few things that they teach you in real estate school that actually has any benefit or puts words to something I think you know instinctively, in terms of terms that you learn, is understanding obsolescence, right? And there's a variety of types of obsolescence. There's functional obsolescence. A lot of folks, and even that's a difficult one to navigate, right? If you buy a home built in 1902, or if you buy a Victorian, every room leads to another room, right? And a lot of folks would call that obsolescence, and a lot of other folks would call that awesome. Because it's a category. It falls into that style of architecture. From a functional standpoint, it's usually not that great, simply because people don't live that way anymore. So architecturally, right, physically, there can be a physical deficiency within the property that makes it less desirable in the marketplace. There can be an aesthetic problem with the property. And actually, that still falls under the same category of functional obsolescence, right? So it doesn't fit today's functions. It doesn't fit the way things are commonly appreciated today in the marketplace, right? And there's levels of that obsolescence. It can be as simple as it's painted purple. It has green shag carpet, right? Which are very super easy, very easy to identify and very easy to rectify. However, the next type is physical obsolescence. And that's really just a worn out property. Your home was built in 1962 and it's got the same air conditioning and heating and ductwork and wiring that might not be the best and most up to date, and the plumbing might not be copper. So there's a lot of different things. We could use the 1902 home example, for instance, where you might have dipole electric, where you literally have two ceramic poles that stick up every once in a while on your property, where there's the positive and the negative wire are separated and moving through a house. A friend of mine's actually buying a home that was built in 1902, and we've been chatting about what he needs to worry about and look out for. I actually love those old houses, by the way. I have a super soft spot for them. And if I ever move back into downtown San Jose, that's the kind of house I'm going to look for. I would love a project like that. Anyway, physical obsolescence. They can be very bad problems. They can be the foundation is having issues, those types of things. Finally, there's economic obsolescence, and that is the location question, right? It's relating to things you can't control, and it's the worst kind of obsolescence because you cannot cure it. Traffic patterns, surrounding neighborhoods, things that get built that are bad for residential housing. Whatever, something outside of the control of the owner of the property is happening, and that causes economic obsolescence. And those are all things. So obviously, if you're doing a flipping gig, you don't want to get economic obsolescence because you can't solve that. But those other two categories are items that sincere flippers who want to do things look for these elements of obsolescence and attempt to solve them. And some of them do an amazing job. Anyone who's ever watched HGTV or any of the bazillion shows where people buy and flip or remodel or do these things, that's what it's all about. It's about taking these elements of obsolescence and eliminating them, getting rid of them, making it a more marketable product so people want it. So I think when we start to see deteriorations in the number of investors flipping, we need to try to figure out what's the cycle. Whenever you start to see a drop-off, particularly in crazy markets where over a relatively short period of time, we've seen ridiculous increases in prices in some markets, those are typically the markets where you see things slow first when things are going to slow, at least for flippers, because a lot of those folks are not your gung-ho flippers. And I'm defining gung-ho here as folks who ride the wave of appreciation more than they ride the wave of solving elements of obsolescence. So you tend to see a bit of a drop under those circumstances. And the reason why that's important is when those folks start to jump, you need to figure out your situation. Because while I know a lot of folks who do flipping and are awesome at it and have always done well, except for the most extreme circumstances, because they've simply improved the value of the property. I've had some folks who've done a job where they've remodeled and then rented it and held it for a while with the intent of selling it after a couple of years. And then the market turned on them. This would be back in the 2006, 2007 period of time. And it simply didn't make sense for them to sell it. The market had dropped too far. So they just continued to rent. They didn't lose any money. They just had to change their strategy. So that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about using this data as an opportunity to sit back, reevaluate, and figure out what the smart strategy for you is over the coming year or this next buying season or whenever your buying season is. Maybe your buying season is winter because you tend to get better deals during that time. Always a possibility. And then that gives you some months to work on a property to get it all up to date so that you are ready right when the market tends to heat up, which is right at the end of that first quarter. All right, so we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about some of the underpinning reasons why they stopped. They're obvious, but we're going to cover them anyway, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about flipping, and we've seen a change in the data in the last quarter, and I think it's a good idea to always be aware of these things, even if you're not a flipper. I think if you're someone who's a buy and hold and that's all you ever do, I think it's always about making the right decision given the circumstances. And I tend to be more of a buy and hold guy. If all things being equal, I'd tend to buy and hold. But by being aware of the data that is changing or the trends that are occurring within the communities that you are working in, you can maybe make a move that can help you preserve your profit in a property or make a move that's going to facilitate you being more aggressive in other areas of your investment strategy. So that's why we're talking about this, because as I mentioned, in the second quarter of 2017, the home flipping report from ATTOM Data Solutions indicated that home flipping dropped. Home flipping dropped to 5.6% of all home sales during the second quarter, down from 6.9% in the first quarter, but unchanged from last year. So we're seeing about the same number of flippers, but on a month-to-month basis or quarter-to-quarter basis, we actually saw this decline. Now, what's interesting is that I would have normally expected to see a much bigger increase between first and second quarter. So that tends to be when those things are happening. But according to the report, and they define a flip as a property that is sold in an arm's length sale for a second time within a 12-month period. And the information is based on publicly recorded sales deed data collected by ATTOM Data Solutions in more than 950 counties, accounting for more than 80% of the U.S. population. What's interesting here is not only is the number of flips down, and remember, that's a misleading statistic to talk about things being down overall. The reason why things are down overall, and I mean, things are down in terms of number of sales, period, but it's because the inventory is low, not because any one segment is buying less necessarily. Investors are sometimes an exception to that, but so there's simply fewer properties to buy. So we continue to see inventory going down and prices going up. So of course, overall occurrences of certain kinds of sales in every segment are going to be less in these metro areas. That's not the impressive piece of data. That's actually not the reason why I thought this was a valuable thing to check out at this point in the game. No, the important data here is that the average gross flipping profit decreased for the third consecutive quarter, falling to $67,516 during the second quarter. Now, that's a 48.4% return on investment for flippers, down from 49%. So not a huge drop, but a drop nonetheless. The previous quarter had been 49.6. 49% the previous quarter and 49.6 from the second quarter last year, to the lowest level since the third quarter of 2015. Quote, home flippers are employing a number of strategies to give them an edge in the increasingly competitive environment where flipping yields are being compressed, according to Senior Vice President Darren Bloomquist for ATTOM. He went on to say many flippers are gravitating toward lower-priced areas where discounted purchases are more readily available, often due to foreclosure or some other type of distress. Many of those lower-priced areas also have strong rental markets, giving flippers a consistent pipeline of demand from buy-and-hold investors looking for turnkey rentals. He went on to say, in markets where distressed discounts have largely dried up, flippers are showing more willingness to leverage financing when acquiring properties, often purchasing closer to full market value and then relying more heavily on price appreciation to fuel their flipping profits. And that's a concern. If you're relying on price appreciation alone to make your profits happen, you're not doing it in a way that I think protects you from potential downturns. Now, remember, if you've been listening for a while, you know that we've talked about a lot of the warning signs that indicate that bad things are coming. Here on the show, I've told you that probably a year from now, we will be in a position where things aren't as great as we would like, and we'll look back at this October as potentially when it started. My crystal ball estimation several weeks ago, probably over a month ago now, was that October will be a month where we'll see a decline in the stock market, And that could be just the first domino in a series of events that causes some broader problems for the market. And I won't go into all the details, but the end result is an inflation that occurs. And as we know, inflationary influences simply are the invisible tax. It means that the money in your pocket will buy less a year from now than it will today. And as we have seen with all kinds of other stresses on the consumer right now, if they're forced to make choices on what they're buying because their income isn't keeping pace with inflation and they're still having to buy the same stuff, it drives us into a situation where the inflation would absolutely impact real estate prices. Let's see. As the market share and number of home flippers dropped, the dollar volume of home flipper financing climbed to nearly a 10-year high. So we're seeing a lot more financing in the home flipping environment. Now, this is also a little bit more concerning because if there's a lot more financing in place, that simply means there's a greater burden on the investor once escrow closes in terms of indebtedness and holding costs, and also puts you in a little bit more of a dicey situation because if you hold the property, the longer you hold the property, and if you're concerned about the potential for the market not continuing to raise the prices through appreciation, then you're potentially caught in a position where you are in trouble because you're suddenly holding a property where you may not be able to liquidate it for the amount that you would need in order to make it a profitable deal. More than 35% of homes flipped in the second quarter were with financing, up from 33.2% in the previous quarter and 32.3% last year. This also marks the highest level since the third quarter of 2008. Let's see. The only other piece of data here was that the dollar value of financing increased to $4.4 billion, reaching the highest level since the third quarter of 2007, a nearly 10-year high. So we're finding investors who are doing flipping getting far more leverage, or far more of them are using leverage, conventional leverage, in order to close some of these deals. So what's the takeaway? If you are someone who's out there investing, what is this? What's the walk away from this? Well, number one is there are still tons of folks, despite this reduction in the amount that's being made, that are relying on the market momentum, the momentum of the increase, the appreciation of properties to fuel their profits, according to this data. That should be a concern. If you're someone who is a flipper, and you're someone who has relied predominantly on the appreciation within the marketplace to increase the value of your property, I think a smart tactic, if you want to continue doing flipping, would be to turn your eye towards the elements of obsolescence that you can solve within your property. When you solve elements of obsolescence, by definition, you're increasing the value and desirability of the property. Now, remember, that doesn't always end up equaling a higher price tag come sales time. It could. It usually will. But it could also equal selling faster. In my opinion, you'd win on both sides. You would sell it you'd sell it faster for better terms for a better price. I think all the way around you'd end up winning on that one. But also, by jumping through that hoop, you potentially insulate yourself from a downturn. When there's a downturn, and it becomes more difficult, and we are finally at the point where things are not selling and we start to accumulate an inventory. I think in a situation like that, there will still be buyers, but if you're the best looking example of a property of your kind within that marketplace and you're at a reasonable price, you're going to get sold before the other guys who are just relying on the appreciation within the marketplace because you've solved obsolescence problems that they haven't. So make sure to keep that stuff in mind. Now, if you're someone who's looking at just getting into flipping properties, this is not me saying don't do it. This is me saying get the ground truth in your area to determine whether or not it makes sense. Is this an area where you're starting to see a slowdown in the amount folks are making? Do some research, find out what's happening in your marketplace, and move from there. All right, folks. I do appreciate you taking your valuable time out to spend it with me on this show. Hopefully, I have left more value on the table in terms of things to think about than the time you've invested in today's show. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.